What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Monday, August 8th, 2016. Getting into the month here, start of a brand new week. We have lots of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. Getting into the political news here. We're seeing all kinds of articles springing up in the independent media, and the corporate media doesn't know what to do. They're thrashing around because they're outnumbered. I mean, if you really think about it, every one of you out there, our listeners, our readers, you are part of the independent media. When you take this material and you put it on your Facebook and you email it to your friends, we're all collectively the independent media, and we are so much larger than the corporate media. We're not paid as much, obviously. So we're seeing this article that came out of Medium.com, and the headline is Hillary Clinton corrupt? And my first response is that a trick question? And the article's header is an archive of financial improprieties, and it's one of the many lists that we're seeing out there that are basically going back and summarizing all that's been going on with the Clinton campaign and the Clinton history, going all the way back to Little Rock, Arkansas. And all of this stuff is going on out there, and people are reading it because they understand something has gone seriously wrong with the corporate media. Because the corporate media traditionally is supposed to be the watchdog on government abuse. It has failed that mission, never more obviously than this election season. In fact, we've got another article from the New American, no less, saying, is this election Clinton versus Trump? No, it's the corporate media versus America. And they're basically saying the rules of journalism, objectivity, impartiality have been thrown out the window. And it concludes saying the pro-Hillary bias is so obvious and blatant, it could easily backfire. Because if people see it for what it is, an attempt to shove a candidate down our throats, they're going to dig their heels in. Now, we found another version of that video about how CNN admits to giving Hillary Clinton a free ride. This is CNN's Chris Cuomo and Brooke Baldwin admitting on live television that they're helping Hillary Clinton. They're giving her a free ride. They're not going to talk about any of her scandals. And they're the biggest ones promoting her campaign. This is from CNN itself. This is CNN, the Clinton News Network. So grab this video, make a local copy, send it to everybody that you know that's out there saying, oh, but the corporate media says Hillary is winning. The corporate media says Hillary is wonderful. Yeah, the corporate media told you Saddam had nuclear weapons too. Now, getting on back to CNN, Carolyn Costello was trying to interview the father of one of the Benghazi victims. And she was out there, trying to put away this story about how Hillary lied to everybody about this stupid video. And we have the State Department documents where before she talked to the Benghazi families, before she went on TV, they knew it was a terrorist attack, which looked really bad coming up on Obama's reelection. So they invented this story about the video. And then when the family members went public, Hillary tore into them. She tore into Pat Smith. And so Costello had the father of one of the victims there and tried to get him to say, your memory could be wrong. It was so long ago, and you're old and you're weak and you're fragile and you're frail. And really, it could just be your memory that's the problem. And apparently he stunned her because this guy keeps a diary. And on the day he had been talked to, actually the day after he was talked to by Hillary Clinton, he wrote down what she had told them. So it's out of the reach of faulty memory when you have a hard copy record. And so then Costello tries to back up and say, well, what do you think Hillary should be, saying and doing? What will make this right? And, of course, he said, well, she needs to apologize for calling us all liars. Now, one of the leaks in the DNC emails showed how corporate media outlets, in particular MSNBC and the New York Times, openly, actively sabotaged Bernie Sanders to give Hillary the nomination. And by the way, none of this should be shocking because they did exactly the same thing when Bill Clinton was running. Remember, George Herbert Walker Bush needed to get out of the White House because the Lawrence Commission was getting closer and closer to him over that whole Iran-Contra mess. So he needed to lose his reelection, but he needed to lose it to a Democrat who he knew would keep the secret of what had been going on down with the gun and drug running from Arkansas down to Nicaragua, which was completely illegal, violation of the Boland Amendment. And so George Herbert Walker Bush, former head of the CIA, went out and used the Mockingbird Network and said, we're going to push Bill Clinton on the American people. And they supported him. We have Don Hewitt, the executive producer of 60 Minutes, on video admitting they edited their Jennifer Flowers segment to make her look goofy and help Bill Clinton to that nomination. They've been doing it all along. There's nothing new. It's not shocking. It's not a new development. So getting back to the present day, in one email exchange, the DNC boasted they could get New York Times reporter Nick Confessore to bury the references to Hillary Clinton's victory fund, around which there seems to have been a huge amount of economic shenanigans. And let me see here. I forgot to do this at the very, very beginning of the show. Too many buttons, too many switches. There we are. All right, so getting on back to this thing. It's out there in the open. The Democratic National Committee was feeding stuff to the corporate media. They were getting pre-publication copies of articles to comment and change. Newt Gingrich is out there acknowledging the corporate media is 95% against Donald Trump. Rudy Giuliani is out there saying the corporate media ignored that Hillary lied to the Gold Star mother. And then they went after Donald Trump. But by far the most bizarre example of media bias comes out of the Charlotte Observer. We have a critique of the article on WhatReallyHappened.com, and the headline reads, Charlotte Observer loses its mind over Donald Trump. And this guy came out with this story that purported to be an interview of Donald Trump in which he said, it's ridiculous to think I could build a wall and get Mexico to pay for it. You guys actually believe me. And it should have been labeled as obvious humor and satire, but it wasn't. It was presented as straight news, all of it completely fictional, and it was picked up and carried all over the corporate media. Complete and total fabrication. Now, if you have cable TV, and I know most of you do, there is a movie called Our Brand is Crisis. Sarah Bullock stars. And it's making the rounds on cable TV again, and it's sort of a loose retelling of a dirty tricks campaign that was being run down in South America. And if you look at what they're doing, that's a lot of what goes on. Go back and read the original book of All the President's Men. Campaigns are powered by dirty tricks. And we're seeing them all come on out this time. Now, over at the New York Times, they had this editorial by Michael Morell, ex-head of the CIA, endorsing Hillary Clinton and accusing Donald Trump of being an unwitting agent of the Russian Federation. He's a commie. He's a Ruski. We can't do this. What the New York Times failed to disclose is that this Michael Morell has deep ties to a gentleman named Philip Reines, who's one of Hillary Clinton's principal gatekeepers in the media. The guy's a hired hack, even if he is ex-head of the CIA. Guess you got to do something after you leave the agency. And the good news is people didn't fall for it, because over on Twitter, everybody just ripped into this guy. They're making fun of him. They're mocking him. And, of course, if you look at the history of the CIA, anything said by any of their officials is going to be looked at askance. These are people who lie for a living. They even lie to Congress. They've been caught lying to Congress. Again, that whole Iran-Contra mess was a violation of the Boland Amendment. And they were lying through their teeth trying to cover everything up. Now, there's another little article, and this came out over at vidrebel.wordpress.com. And it raises a very powerful weapon we all have to remind the media they're supposed to be working for us, not for Hillary Clinton. Anytime any TV station, radio station, cable company has to come up for license renewal, they are required to have public hearings so that members of the community being served by that particular facility can stand up and say, yes, this company is doing a good job serving the public interest, or no, they are not. And so what you're all going to do now is write a nice little letter to your local TV station, your local radio station, your local cable provider, and say, unless they start covering the election honestly, objectively, impartially, that you promise you will show up at the next public hearing when their licenses are up for renewal. Because stations have lost their license when the public shows up and says they're not serving the public interest. It's a real threat. And it does give us a little bit of a tool to exert some pressure and say, please do your job honestly, or you're not going to be doing your job at all. Now, another example of the media bias, they're trying to make a big deal about how Trump threw our baby out of his rally. And they had two pieces of video. The baby's crying, and Trump says, I love crying babies. And then they cut to another one where Trump is saying, well, it's okay, I changed my mind, you can take the baby out. The part they're not showing you is that the mother had already stood up and was walking out. And Trump was looking after her and saying, yeah, it's okay, you can take the baby out. Because he thought maybe she was going to sit there because he had said sit there. But it's all very selective editing. They're doing everything they can to cheat. Now, you've been hearing about all these polls where Hillary's ahead by 10, by 12, by 1,600. Hillary leads by 15,000%. Would we lie to you? And the fact is that, yes, they are lying. Remember when they actually admitted they were changing their polling methodology at the close of the Democratic National Convention, and analysts have looked at what's going on, and they found one of the tweaks of methodology is they're simply polling far more Democrats than Republicans. So, of course, they're going to get numbers that favor Hillary. And I'm sure they go to bed at night saying, well, it's not like we're really faking the numbers. We're just sort of directing where the polls are going here, which amounts to the same thing. Now, over at Investment Watch blog, they had somebody who was doing their own polls. And more people are doing their own polls. They're turning on the corporate media nonsense because we know that's what it is. So there was a poll that was done. 50,000 people polled in all 50 states. They selected 1/3 Republicans, 1/3 Democrats, and 1/3 who were not aligned with any party. Trump won by 67-19. That's almost a cheat-proof margin. Now, despite the best rigging and all the rest of it, Hillary's lead over Trump has flatlined. And Reuters is out there saying, we don't know what's going on. We just thought she was going to go right through the roof here, and they're acting all baffled and everything. It's because everybody understands what's going on. Hillary's lead in the Reuters poll has returned to only 3 ahead of Trump, when she was well above that just a few days ago. Now, there's an organization out there called Long Room. And this group, they just got set up. They're looking at all the corporate media polls. They're analyzing the methodology, and they're identifying the sources of skewing and bias. And by subtracting out the skew and the bias, what they've come to is Donald Trump is leading 44.2% to Clinton at 43.3%. Not a huge margin. But again, it undermines the fact that the corporate media polls are absolutely unreliable. They're not measuring the will of the voter. They're trying to manufacture it. And we're starting to see some real desperation out there. Apparently, over in Andover, there was this woman who got out of her car with a can of spray paint and vandalized a Trump sign on private party, sprayed one side of it with Putin's, it was an expletive, and on the other, Gold Star Fail. Now, the homeowner, Art Gonsalves, confronted this woman, Susan Bryant. She got in her car and drove off so fast he had to jump out of the way. And she has been arrested and charged. It's not exactly presenting a very positive image of the Hillary supporters, and it gets worse. Because there's a story over here in Information Liberation about how vandals painted swastikas all over this woman's lawn over her Donald Trump signs. Real brown shirt mentality. And finally, there was this other story that came out of governmentslaves.info. This is over in Cleveland. Back on July 25th, there was a political discussion at a bar in Cleveland, and this Ohio man, Darnell Hall, went to his car, came back with a gun, and shot the Trump supporter once in the leg. He's turned himself into police. He's out on bail. But again, this does not represent Hillary supporters in a very, very good light. They're resorting to thuggery, violence, vandalism. It's real brown shirt operations going on. And finally, coming out of Information Liberation, there was this 20-year-old student who videoed herself stealing 2 Donald Trump signs off a random person's lawn in exchange for 2 retweets. And just went on out there and said, I'm going to video, wants to be a social. Okay. I forgot to do BAM user. My apologies. I'm just dealing with so much here. Okay, there's BAM user. I apologize. It's back. I really need somebody in this room helping me with all of this stuff. So we have this aspiring social media star was out there tweeting her stealing of Donald Trump signs. This is the public face of the Hillary supporters. They're above the rules. Violence is okay. Vandalism is okay. Now, somebody sent me a story where apparently 8 kids on their own held their own voting poll. And they basically went around their town. They went to the International House of Pancakes, Costco, Walmart, Best Buy, 2 Petcos, Big Y, and a gas station, and just asked people, how are you voting? Their results, Trump 5,112, Clinton 642, other 135. And of course, we once again put up our poll, if the election were held today, who would you vote for? And Hillary's numbers have actually gone down from last Friday. Last Friday, she had 3% of the vote. Today, she's got only 2%. So it's really out there. Now, there's another analysis coming out of the truthdivision.com. And it said, the way you know the media is rigging is just go over to social media, like Facebook, and count the number of likes. Trump has 10,174,000 likes, Clinton only 5,300,000. And we know that Hillary holds the record for the most fake Twitter followers and phony Facebook friends. And no doubt her hacker squad is going to go over to Facebook tonight and try and run her numbers back up. Now, Hillary is taking her struggle and she's trying to turn it around as fundraising. She's sent out a new letter to all of her supporters saying, you know, Donald Trump could still beat me. I need your money. He could still outspend me. That's nonsense. She's outspending Donald Trump 100 to 1. But anything to get another buck into her hand, and she's out there saying Donald Trump could still win. Would be nice if she actually believed it. Now let's get on back to those Democratic National Committee emails. Julian Assange just granted a video interview. It's on the front of WhatReallyHappened.com, and he revealed a lot of information, including another scandal involving this French company that was a donor to Hillary's campaign and is also a supporter of ISIS. And he reiterated one more time, Russia was not the source of the Democratic National Committee emails. They came from a leak. It was never Russia. We're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And on Fox News, they're out there with the headline, Hillary Clinton leads Donald Trump by double digits in latest national poll. They're not actually saying which poll they're talking about. And this is basically more of the same thing that we had when they were trying to convince us Donald Trump was ready to drop out. It's a dirty trick to discourage Donald Trump's supporters. And again, you ought to look at that movie, Our Brand is Crisis. because it shows just how dirty campaign trickery can be. Now then, getting on back to this idea where they're out there saying Donald Trump is a tool of Russia. He hates war. He must be in league with the Russians and so forth and so on. But the reality is that accusing an enemy of being in league with Russia or the commies as a smear tactic is nothing new. Remember the McCarthy era? McCarthy fended off complaints that he was engaged basically in destroying innocent people's lives. This is communist. I have a list of members in the U.S. government with allegiances to communist Russia. And it was a major national scandal. Another movie, if you have not seen it, is Goodbye and Good Night. George Clooney produced, also acted in, about Edward R. Murrow when Murrow went up against McCarthy. Politics is a dirty business. It really is. And apparently America Online today was trying to claim that Donald Trump is the darling of the American Nazi Party. Because they got somebody to come on out and say, yes, I'm a high official in the American Nazi Party, and Donald Trump is our best chance at the Fifth Reich. They're doing what's called the spaghetti approach. They're going to hurl as much stuff at Donald Trump as they can and hope some of it will stick. Now, meanwhile, another story coming out of Target of Liberty. William Binney, who's a former NSA senior mathematician, he was an NSA whistleblower long before Edward Snowden, says that as near as he can tell, NSA has another Snowden or maybe more than one. And that his conclusion is the NSA was behind the hack of the Democratic National Committee emails. There are a lot of people out there inside the government who have reached their breaking point. All right, let's grab some phone calls here. Clinton, Las Vegas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, Mike?
Yes, you're on the air.
Okay, didn't John Kennedy also pull a dirty trick like the missile gas, I believe?
Okay, we got a really, really bad phone connection, but yeah, as a matter of fact, the historical evidence is that John F. Kennedy stole his election from Richard Nixon, which of course made Nixon his enemy for life, plus his brother, plus whatever else.
Okay, now here's what I wanted to ask you. When Hillary's bobbing her head like that, I can only say two things. Could be right, she could be just joshing around. If I was her campaign manager, I would tell her to stop doing that because too many people are asking questions. But other people are coming out with their own videos. They're saying this is not a seizure, but an involuntary movement. Not a seizure though. And they're talking she's coming on with Parkinson's disease.
Well, my first analysis was that Hillary Clinton is desperate to prove to the American people that she actually has a personality. So she's hamming it up and mugging it for the cameras. However, there is another possibility, and that is people who suffer strokes or they're having some kind of impairment tend to overcompensate as a way of trying to conceal it. And we're going to be talking about Hillary's health issues a little bit further on in because we have to tread very carefully there. But there is a valid concern, okay?
But, they're coming out saying Donald Trump's the mentally imbalanced one. Donald Trump has done something politically. He is obviously very intelligent and has thought this out for a long, long time. And he has outsmarted all these so-called geniuses. I think they're just kind of, they might be thrashing on this one. I don't know. Get sympathy for Hillary. But saying that Donald Trump is a Russian spy and he's mentally unstable, they even got the former director of the CIA, Hayden, out there saying he's unstable.
Well, that is a bit of an irony. Listen, we got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be back with another phone call after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. Now, there's probably one positive note in all of this screaming about Donald Trump is unfit, Donald Trump is mentally unstable. They're basically down to name-calling. They have been researching this guy, trying to find some real dirt on him. They can't. It's all rumor and innuendo. They tried to turn his wife's modeling career into a negative. That didn't work. She's going to be the hottest first lady in U.S. history. And so they're out there with all of this stuff. And for President Obama to come on out and declare Donald Trump unfit for office after Fast and Furious, Obamacare, a crashing economy, chaos in the Mideast, and Obama thinks Trump is unfit to be president, that is how completely out of control this is getting. Okay, back to the phones. George in Texas. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I hope your weekend was good.
Well, it was kind of busy.
Well, the thing is, my friend who's a mole and so like one of the George Soros front groups, they're talking about around October to be running ads in Craigslist to pay drivers $300 a day to go take people not to the polling place, but to multiple polling places, because they found out charter buses are just stick out like a sore thumb, taking people to polling places to vote more than once.
It doesn't say that. Well, I would not be surprised at all. That's why they're working so hard to overturn all the voter ID laws in all the states. They're literally trying to throw the gates open for massive election fraud to give the Empress Hillary the throne.
Well, it's kind of strange when they talk about Hillary being president. The thing is, even though she's not fit by her health, excuse me, but there's going to have a lot of handlers behind her making sure the agenda's carried out. I can tell you that right now.
Well, that's very, very obvious as well. And again, yes, Hillary served in the Senate. What did she actually do while she was there? Yes, she served as Secretary of State. What did she do there that didn't devolve into complete and utter chaos? And we have somebody who couldn't secure her own email server, and she wants to be trusted with the nuclear launch codes. I don't think so. And I want to make one more point here with all this rigging of the polls and the election fraud and all the rest of it. And I still hold to the position, if the government cannot prove beyond all doubt the accuracy and honesty and fairness of the elections by which they claim authority over the people, then we the people are neither legally nor morally obligated to obey that government's dictates, to pay its bills, and certainly not to sacrifice life and limb of our children in their endless, pointless wars of conquest.
Well, the thing is, I just hope when Trump is inaugurated, he's allowed to be, because I really think, even though he wins, I know Obama's going to be throwing up roadblocks to keep him from that transition of power from going through.
Yeah.
I mean, you might have...
Obama made that weird statement the other day that he won't stand for a Trump presidency. What's he going to do if Trump has a landslide victory that even the vote riggers can't overcome like we saw in Brexit? Is he going to declare a national emergency? Is he going to change the locks on the White House and say you can't come in?
Well, I just hope, Project Veritas can, if they do try to hire these drivers, like they say they might be paying $300 a day to take people to the polling places, I just hope Project Veritas, if somebody gets in there and captures that on video of what's really going on, hopefully you can short-circuit it.
Well, look at all the proof that surfaced of fraud during the primaries. The government won't prosecute it. The corporate media won't talk about it. This really is a battle between the establishment and the American people.
Well, I think cooler heads prevail, and we will prevail in the end.
I certainly hope so, because I hate to think what the alternative might be. Okay, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. Now let's talk about this Iranian scientist, Shahram Amiri. And this was a gentleman who provided a large amount of information about what Iran was doing to the United States government. I think he got something like $5 million for it. Now, Amiri, his official story was he had been kidnapped and coerced into cooperating with the United States of America. And he finally decided to go back home because his family had never been able to get out of Iran. And now Senator Tom Cotton has come on out and said, how did Iran find out that the kidnap and coercion story was false? Well, because 10 days before this guy went back to Iran, Hillary Clinton was discussing this guy and the secrets he'd sold to the U.S. government on her private email server. So we may have our first confirmed incidents of an asset being killed because of lax security. Eric Prince, the former CEO of Blackwater, is out there saying, yes, Hillary Clinton very likely caused the Iranian nuclear scientist's death. They executed him for treason. We need to know. Now, Hillary's people are saying, but Iran could have found that out from anywhere. Okay, let's find out where they got it. We need to know. Meanwhile, Judge Jeanine is out there just absolutely slamming FBI Director James Comey for failing to do his job. Comey is sticking to his story that they're not recommending charges because they couldn't find evidence that Hillary Clinton meant to do wrong. And it shows a complete ignorance of Title 18, or Comey's desire or hope that you are ignorant of Title 18 because intent is not necessary. It says right in there, exposure of U.S. national secrets through carelessness and negligence is a violation. And Comey got up there and said, yeah, she was careless, she was reckless, she was negligent. Have you noticed that all of Hillary's defenses for all these scandals are painting a picture of somebody who's mentally unfit to be president? Careless, negligent, reckless, has a brain short circuit, has a faulty memory because Hillary says she remembered Comey had said she was being truthful with the public, which is not what he said. I don't think we want somebody with a brain in that poor condition in that Oval Office. Now, Hillary's vice presidential pick, Kane, is out there saying that, well, Hillary said she's sorry. That should be good enough for you, the American people. I mean, what's wrong with you? Can't you forgive and forget? Not after almost a quarter of a century of this stuff. It's like a little kid. They keep acting badly and they say, I'm sorry. And then they go and do it again. After a while, you begin to understand the I'm sorry is not sincere. Now, getting into desperation on the cusp of madness, the Hillary campaign has released a propaganda ad pushing this idea that Donald Trump is a Russian agent. He's working for Vladimir Putin, which is kind of weird when you realize that Hillary Clinton illegally sold U.S. uranium to Russia. She's got a much stronger, provable connection to Russia than Donald Trump has. If the corporate media was being honest about their job, they would have gone with this story. Trump, of course, came back with his own ad talking about national security and saying, how can we trust somebody who can't even secure her own email server to be able to protect the United States of America? And the answer is, of course, you can't. Now, over at the New York Times, Yamik Alcindor is saying that Clinton's continued email lies, and they're being honest to say that's what they were, lies, underscore that Hillary has real credibility issues. Time and time again, when people are being told about Hillary, the trust factor is a major, major, major problem. Now, Hillary's out there trying to pick up more endorsements to put her over the top. She's going after some Republicans, like Condoleezza Rice and Henry Kissinger. And there are a lot of establishment Republicans, war hawks, Israel firsters, who are crossing party lines to support Hillary. But I don't think this is going to work out quite the way Hillary Clinton wants, because in the popular opinion, Condi Rice and Kissinger are war criminals. And we're beginning to see what's coming on out. This Republican-Democrat duopoly is kind of an illusion. It's really the war party united against Americans who've had enough of war. That's what's going on here. Now, it's just been announced today there's going to be another Republican entering the 2016 race, and they keep hitting that point, Republican, 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 even though he's going to run as an independent. Now, this is Evan McCullin, and is a CIA veteran. He's the chief policy director for the U.S. House Republican Conference. He's going to throw his hat into the ring. I thought the deadline to declare your candidacy had already come and gone. This is a desperate and pathetic attempt to try and split the GOP vote to hand the White House to Hillary Clinton. Now, I want to do a little bit of a flashback here, and let me preface this by addressing the concern of a lot of people that, once again, those who are standing up to the Clintons, who are in possession of incriminating evidence, who are digging in the wrong parts of the shadows keep meeting these strange ends. And the one that is uppermost in my mind is John Ash, who was originally reported to have died of a heart attack, and then somebody leaked out the fact that his throat had been crushed, and they changed the story to, oh, he accidentally dropped a barbell on his own throat. Now, John Ash was a former United Nations official who'd been caught up in the bribery case involving Chinese billionaire Ng Lak Seng. Now, Ng Lak Seng was the source of much of the money funneled through Charlie Tree into Bill Clinton's re-election campaign back in 1996. At the same time, Bill Clinton was authorizing the sale of highly sensitive technology to China over the objections of the intelligence community and the Pentagon. The scandal was called Chinagate, and the investigation into it kind of went nowhere because Ng Lak Seng refused to come to the United States to be questioned, refused to be questioned in China because he was not under actual indictment. The extradition laws wouldn't apply. And then all of a sudden, about a year ago, he's here in the U.S. and he gets arrested for bribery. And now congressional investigators can talk to him about this. So Ng Lak Seng and John Ash were going to court, and literally on the morning of the day John Ash was going to testify about the links between Seng and the Clintons, he dies under what are very obvious questionable circumstances. And we're hearing, oh, you know, it's all wacko conspiracy theory, blah, 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 blah. So we posted a flashback video for George Wallace, who was running against Richard Nixon when that whole creep Watergate thing was going on. And he survived the assassination attempt, although it put him in a wheelchair. And George Wallace came on out and said his assailant was part of a conspiracy. Now, what were we getting from the corporate media back then? It's all crazed lone nut shooters. There's no conspiracy, you wacko kids out there. But George Wallace was the fourth political opponent of Richard Nixon to be shot. There was an obvious pattern there, and the corporate media of the day, just like today, oh, it's all coincidence. It's all lone nuts. There's nothing there. Yeah. Denied there was any connection to that. So this stuff has, in fact, been going on all along. The difference is, in this generation, Americans know what's going on. All righty, I want to touch very lightly and gingerly on this issue of Hillary's health. And there is undoubtedly an issue there. We know she's had a fall, a concussion, a blood clot in the brain. We know about the Fresnel prism in her eyeglasses, which indicates that without the glasses, she cannot get her eyes to lock up at a single focal point, which could be from the blood clot, could also be a sign of a minor stroke in the brain stem. But there's an issue there. And now people are starting to focus on Hillary's erratic, at times, behavior and the numerous instances where she seems to have difficulty climbing stairs, as well as the identity of this one handler who seems to constantly be very close to her, closer than the Secret Service. Probably the only person closer to Hillary than this gentleman is Huma Abedin herself. And on that video where there was a ruckus at a Hillary rally, this was the guy who jumped up and told her, keep talking, like she needed to be reminded. And that's got a lot of people scratching their heads. Now, it does need to be looked into. But it has to be handled very delicately, because Hillary's people will say, oh, it's a conspiracy theory. And by the way, the corporate media is out there saying, there's nothing there. Absolutely nothing. They'll play for sympathy. Oh, it's underhanded. She's in absolutely perfect health. But we need to remember something out of history. Politicians, with the media, do conceal medical problems from the public. Most Americans did not know that President Franklin Roosevelt had polio, which he contracted more than 10 years before he ran for president. They didn't know about it until after he died. At Roosevelt's request, media images always showed him seated in an open car or standing at a podium. If a photographer did try and catch him in the wheelchair, Secret Service agents would tear the film out of the cameras. Roosevelt's version of Air Force One actually had a little elevator that would come out of the belly of the plane and reach all the way down to the runway for Roosevelt in his wheelchair to ride in. And let's not forget Ronald Reagan, who was suffering from Alzheimer's when he was in the Oval Office, according to his own son, Ron. So, yeah, this stuff does happen. If there is a medical problem with Hillary, prior precedent says, yes, they will try and hide it. So let's get on to this issue about election fraud, which is, it's massive. We've already seen that in the primaries. And everybody is leaping on Donald Trump for saying this election could very easily be rigged, when anybody who's paying attention knows that's going to happen. And so they're out there saying, well, this is preposterous, it's dangerous, it's ridiculous. America Online is on board of this, saying what a ridiculous thing to suggest elections can be stolen. Now, anybody who's actually studied the epidemic of election fraud that has been going on in this nation, the only ones saying Trump is ridiculous are those who won or hope to win their elections through election fraud. You need to go over to blackboxvoting.org, see that home HBO documentary, Hacking Democracy, and go back and read the histories of Huey P. Long and then the Battle of Athens, Tennessee. And you will see that election fraud is a reality in American politics, and it has been all along. And because of these electronic machines, it is far more pervasive than at any other time in our history. Meanwhile, getting on back to CNN, Brian Stelter is out there saying, the media should never even never even reported on Donald Trump saying that elections are being rigged. You can't do that. He did say it, and it would be honest to repeat it. But there's an illusion that's being maintained, and they're afraid that illusion is fading away. More when we come back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. So let's talk about election rigging. We know it goes on. We have seen it time and time again. We know that these electronic voting systems are completely invisible to the public. Nobody's allowed to look at the software. It's deemed to be proprietary. Like there's some big, deep, dark secret about software that says when you push this button, add 1 to this counter. Now, what's at stake here is, of course, the illusion that our elections are honest, that we do have a democracy. And it is an illusion, but it has to be maintained. Because Americans put up with a lot of nonsense from the government on the illusion that somehow or other this is what they voted for. That's why it's being maintained. Yes, we're taking all your money and we're getting your kids killed in wars, all across the world, and we're spying on you. But remember, you voted for this. When you voted these candidates in, you voted for their programs and agendas, so you sit down and stop complaining. That's what's going on. If the American people come to accept that the elections are an illusion, there will be no sense of allegiance left to that government, because we'll understand it's an illegitimate, illegal government. It's a bunch of crooks who stole our country from us. And that's why they're so terrified of Donald Trump making the possibility of a rigged election, because it could destroy that illusion. So they're scared of him. They're scared of the truth getting on out, and they can't stop it. They don't know what to do about it. We reprised that article about this professor from Princeton who showed how easy it was to get into an electronic voting machine, in this case a Sequoia ABC Advantage electronic voting machine, and change the software in just 7 minutes' time. Now, the people trying to maintain that illusion that our elections are beyond being rigged are saying, well, what he did, you couldn't do in the middle of an election. Nobody said that's when it was going to happen. But those election machines will get delivered to the polling places a day, 2 days, maybe even more before the election. And they just sit there. And somebody could come on in and make the necessary changes. It's a completely wide open system, as Bev Harris documented. All right, let's grab a quick phone call from Kathleen in Paris. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, hello.
Hello.
Am I on air?
You are on the air. What's on your mind?
Oh, I was before I ask my question, you said earlier about you were trying to say good night and good luck.
Yes.
Yeah, but you didn't say it quite right. It's good night and good luck.
I thought I said good night and good luck.
The name of the film. Yeah. Anyway, my question is...
Okay, Kathleen, I'm going to have to ask you to wait a minute. We just ran into the top of the hour station identification. Don't hang up. I'm going to come right back to you after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And we're going to go back to Kathleen. Kathleen, you had a question.
Yes, I'll take your comments off air, but I wanted you to comment about what you think is going on with Netanyahu and Putin getting cozy. Seems very strange to me.
Well, I don't think it's all that strange here because Netanyahu, I think, has come to the conclusion that he has pretty much used up the United States of America, and there's nothing much left. It's kind of an empty husk. And we're seeing countries all over the world that are looking at the potential collapse of the U.S. economy and thinking maybe it's time to start doing business with somebody who knows how to do business rather than with somebody who is just constantly making war.
Okay. Yeah, wow. Okay.
I mean, Netanyahu...
Thank you very much.
You're welcome very much. Thank you for the phone call. Netanyahu is always demanding unflinching loyalty from the United States of America, but it's never been returned. Not one little tiny bit. Alrighty, getting on back to the news here. And now then, over in the war zones, Syria and Russia are engaging in major bombing of al-Nusra Front stronghold near Aleppo. What's happened is that the U.S.-backed terror groups have succeeded in breaching the siege that Syria and Russia had placed around there last week. As a result, Russia and Syria are just piling on, destroying terrorist positions in eastern Homs. There's even a report that Russia has gone on in and started courting the leadership of these various groups that are backed by the United States of America and offering them more money and support to fight ISIS and Al-Qaeda. And apparently, Putin's getting a very positive response because these U.S.-backed groups are not very happy with the way the U.S. has been supporting them. Now, over in Turkey, things are getting very, very tense. Erdogan is saying that he absolutely is going to bring back the death penalty after that failed coup. And Deputy Chairman of the center-left Republican People's Party, Namik Havutka, is saying it's time to close down the Incirlik Air Base and kick everybody out. Now, apparently Erdogan, I have to correct myself on that, had a huge rally in a show of strength. More than 1 million people backing him in his efforts to basically pull away from the United States and pivot toward Russia. This is a major foreign policy disaster. Meanwhile, there's another article over at the Canary talking about 5 explosive secret intelligence memos on Libya everybody must read. And absolutely, that is true. And some of the stuff that's contained in those memos is that France wanted control over Gaddafi's billions in gold and silver bullion. This was Hillary Clinton's 27 March 2011 memo. The U.S. and U.K. knew al-Qaeda terrorists were embedded in the rebel groups, yet gave them weapons anyway, from the same confidential intelligence brief. A secret Libya to Syria weapons pipeline was set up to fuel the devastating conflict in Syria, from a 12th of October 2012 Pentagon Secret Intelligence Information Brief. And we know that's what was going on. Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton were sending weapons to ISIS and Al-Qaeda at the same time we were being told these people are our enemies, and that consulate in Benghazi was being used as the hub. Fake propaganda was planted in the media to make Gaddafi look like a fanatical monster that must be stopped at all costs. And don't forget that other memo came on out that said the gold dinar was one of the major reasons for the U.S. going into Libya. Now, another story coming out of Sputnik News. The U.S. Navy is making waves in the Black Sea in an attempt to curtail Russia's dominance, which is kind of a bizarre situation when you realize the U.S. and Europe are being the aggressors here. But it's always in terms of, oh, Russia's the bad guy, Russia's the bad guy, we've got to stop Russia, so forth and so on. The Tantrum Squad is back on my server if you're having trouble connecting right now. Another little interesting article. This came out of Investment Watch blog, and it's talking about the growing schism between Netanyahu and Obama, which is a major, major problem. And it's one of the reasons Netanyahu may be cozying up to Putin. And this article is speculating that if things are not resolved to Obama's satisfaction, that there may in fact be U.S. support for a UN resolution to create a state of Palestine. Now, Google Maps is under major fire because if you go to Google Maps or Google Earth, Palestine has been erased. It's just not there anymore. In fact, in Google Earth, I tried this myself. If you type in Palestine and do a search, it drops you into the Atlantic Ocean off the southwest coast of Africa. All right, we're going to do a quick shout out to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining our network at this time. We're talking about the international news. And here, the propaganda is up there again. This is coming out of Huffington Post, who I would think by now would know better. Iran is ready to attack Israel. Oh, those gosh darn Iranians, they're getting ready to attack Israel. Evil, evil, evil Iran. Now, this is nonsense. Look at the history of the region, and you will see who it is who is constantly committing aggression against their neighbors. And it's not Iran. In fact, Iran has not initiated a war of aggression against another nation in over 200 years. Iran also knows that Israel has nuclear weapons, and they do not wish to have their country turned into a giant green glass parking lot. The only time Iran will use their military is if they're attacked first, which is, of course, what happened when Saddam attacked Iran on behalf of the United States. But they're out there pushing Iran bad, Russia bad. They're all bad. We're all good. They're all bad. And meanwhile, another little reminder here, the Department of Defense Inspector General has issued a report last week that says the Pentagon cannot account for $6.5 trillion. And any minute I'm expecting an airplane to crash into a building because if you'll remember back on September 10th, 2001, Donald Rumsfeld had to get up and explain that, yes, the Pentagon had misplaced $3 trillion. It was here just a minute ago. We just don't know where it went. And it should have been the economic and defense scandal of the year, but 24 hours later, 9/11 happened, and Rumsfeld was off the hook. What a lucky gentleman he was. Now then, as of this month, collective global quantitative easing is now running somewhere above $250 billion with a B dollars per month. And of course, every time they print up more money to give it to the financial people, the banks and everything, it erodes the value of the money in your pocket. They're literally stealing purchasing power from you by overprinting currency in order to hand the wealth to their cronies in those banks. That's the evils of inflation. And they're trying to hide just how bad the inflation is because it's an election year. Meanwhile, we're seeing a report out of Sputnik News. The U.S. has failed to drive a wedge between India and the rest of the BRICS nations. The U.S. had mounted this charm offensive with India. Come on back to the dollar. Come on back. We're sorry about that GMO BT cotton thing. It was a horrible tragedy with all the suicides, but come on back and rejoin us and let BRICS go. And India apparently said with polite respect, no, actually, BRICS is looking like the future, and the Federal Reserve note is looking like the past. China's new Silk Road has accelerated Chinese-Russian relations. They're getting back together. And the reason is very simple. Russia is making deals What is the U.S. making? Wars. We don't know how to make anything else anymore. America's products are poor quality, overpriced. Don't make very many of them anyway. Russia, Azerbaijan, and Iran are looking at new Caspian projects, major engineering, new pipelines that don't go through these choke points everybody's fighting over. They're even talking about the possibility of a new canal that would bypass the Suez. Now, Paul Craig Roberts is out with another article called Another Phony Jobs Report. And he's laying bare some of the shenanigans that the U.S. government likes to play to make things look better than they already are. We already know the unemployment number is a joke. There are 93 million Americans, legal American citizens, willing and able to work who have not been able to find jobs for months, if not years. Now, Paul Craig Roberts is saying that the claimed creation of 200,000 jobs is arrived at statistically using something called the birth-death model that bases that new business ventures will create more unreported new jobs than the unreported job losses from business failures. Now, this is a completely made-up thing. And if you subtract out this made-up number, July saw a gain of only 55,000 jobs, which is not enough to keep up with population growth. Even that 55,000 figure is overstated according to John Williams' report. It's all lies. It's all fraud. They're telling you the economy is doing great. Walk down the street of your nearby town or village. Look at the dilapidated conditions. Look at the retail vacancies. Look at the corrosion. It's just not there. This economy is not doing well. One good indicator, look at the commercials for cars. Those prices are amazing. They're absolutely amazing. Too bad we don't have the money to buy the cars even at those prices. Now, insurance giant Aetna is the latest health insurance provider to announce staggering losses on the Obamacare plans. They lost $300 million last year to Obamacare in just 15 states. Obamacare was a complete unmitigated disaster, which is why it's a joke for Obama to be stating that Donald Trump is unfit to be president. At least Donald Trump knows how to run a business. Obama's never done a business in his life. He doesn't know how one works. He's a community organizer. He gets crowds together and he gets them to shout and scream, and that's it. Look at the unmitigated disaster of Obamacare if you want to know who's fit to be president or not. All right, let's talk about the Olympics. As you know, they have started. I caught the fencing yesterday because that was my sport in college. And they're off to kind of a ragged start. Apparently, the security chief of the Rio Olympics was robbed at knife point. Because apparently the security force of 85,000 is already spread so thin, there wasn't anybody around here. NBC is in a panic. The viewership of the Olympics is way down below what they were expecting, way down what they sold their ads for. And this includes Hillary Clinton's ads, because the Hillary campaign made a huge buy into the Olympics, and they're not going to get the bang for their buck there. And once again, CNN, showing how completely out of touch they are, got very critical over the fact that Michael Phelps, who's probably the greatest Olympic athlete we've had in recent times, was picked to carry the flag for the American team during the opening ceremonies. And CNN's host, W. Kamau Bell, described him as just a tall, successful, rich white guy, and really we should have had a woman, an African-American, and a Muslim to boot, because right now America has enough tall, successful, rich white guys hogging the spotlight. Michael Phelps is not in the spotlight because he's a tall, rich, successful white guy. He's in the spotlight because he won a bunch of those gold medals. And isn't that what the Olympics are supposed to be about? Achievement, not political correctness. And by the way, this thing about the doping scandal has just hit a new low. Along with the regular Olympics, there's been a tradition for a number of years now called the Paralympics, which is a group of games for people who have physical disabilities. They're in wheelchairs and so forth and so on. And it's hard to get a read on this. Obviously, we want the kids to have fun, but at the same time, it's like the old practice they had in England back in the 1800s, where if nothing else was going on, you'd go over to the insane asylum and watch people bang against the walls for entertainment value. But the International Paralympic Committee has confirmed a blanket ban on all Russians competing at the Paralympics, based on the recommendation from the World Anti-Doping Agency. Now, none of these kids have tested positive for performance-enhancing drugs. This World Anti-Doping Agency appears to have a political agenda. They've been pushing, ban all Russian athletes, we don't care if they're doped or not, because we have stories from a couple of former Russian doctors who've defected that maybe doping is going on. That's it. They haven't actually caught anybody with any of this stuff. But ban them all as a punishment. Zero tolerance for doping. Now, to their credit, the International Olympic Committee handed the decision on allowing Russians to compete to the individual committees for each separate event, and to their credit, they have allowed virtually all of the Russian athletes to compete, but never one to give up another chance to slap Russia across the face. The Paralympics have kicked out all their young people. Now, the tradition of the original Olympics was, while the games were taking place, all politics and war were set aside in the spirit of celebration of athletic accomplishment. I mean, that's really how it was. You'd have these two armies fighting each other. And then it would be the first day of the Olympics. They'd put their weapons down. They'd get together and they'd have fun. Then when it was all over, they'd go back to doing whatever they were going to do. In the modern age, the Olympics have unfortunately become another political battlefield. And young athletes pay that price. All right, let's talk a little bit about computers going on. There is a new spyware out. It's called Sauron, from the Lord of the Rings. It's attacking targets in Belgium, China, Russia, and Sweden. And it is supposedly the product of a previously unknown group called Strider, also from Lord of the Rings. And this is a cyber espionage system. It's not ransomware. It's not stealing your credit card information. And the security firm that found this, Symantec, says this software is clearly of interest to a nation-state's intelligence services to spy on other people. Strider uses malware known as RemSec that was designed primarily for espionage. So we may be looking at the beginning of a real cyber war. Oh, but it's all Russia's fault. It's all Russia's fault. Another story coming out of threatpost.com. There's a new worm out there targeting industrial control systems called PLC Blaster for Programmable Logic Control. And again, this is software, malware, that will go on out and infect industrial facilities, power stations, whatever, and cause physical damage in the world. This looks to be a new updated version of Stuxnet. We know who was out there playing with that stuff. And maybe or maybe not, this has something to do with Delta Airlines' problems today, because all their flights are on the ground. Their entire nationwide booking passenger system is down. And it's causing delays not just here in the U.S., Japan, Italy, and Great Britain. All the airport check-in systems, passenger advisory screens, the website, smartphone apps, everything was taken down by this failure. Maybe it's another form of malware, but it's going to cost Delta huge, huge amounts of money. Where's the NSA in all of this? Abusing themselves to porn, according to Edward Snowden. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go to the phones. Rich in Massachusetts. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. Hope you're doing well. I just had a couple of questions. I want to know your opinion. What you think the relationship with Trump and Netanyahu is, because he sure seems to be saying things about cozying up to Israel all the time.
Well, so's Hillary.
As you know. Yeah, right.
Okay,
as you know, we don't vote for Hillary. We're voting for Trump because he's supposed to be the antithesis of that. So I wanted to know what you might make of that. Also, you know, we're voting for Trump because he's supposed to be the antithesis of McCain and Paul Ryan, but yet we find him in the same bed. And I want to know what you really think, how you feel this is going to, you know, transpire out.
Well, first of all, again, Donald Trump is playing politics. He's trying to please the maximum number of people to get elected. But if you look at Israel's media, it is very clear that they would prefer Hillary Clinton over Donald Trump. They know that Hillary will not refuse Israel anything. Donald Trump has a dangerous streak of independence that is not well suited to being a puppet ruler of a nation. Again, looking at this question from Israel's point of view, very clearly they are more in favor of Hillary. As far as the rest of it, I think it's time to shift the paradigm and stop focusing so much on reasons to vote for Trump and really start focusing on all the reasons why we should vote against Hillary Clinton. And I think we need to be doing that.
Yeah, well, I've supported Trump all the way in. I donated to his campaign, but honestly, I can't stand Ryan, and McCain has just been horrendous and should have been out 20 years ago. But he
may be out this time. He may be out this time. Apparently, his challenger, let me back up here on this one, was Dr. Kelly Ward. Apparently, Kelly is pulling ahead in the polls, and McCain may get his pink slip. I think they all need to be getting pink slips. I think it's
exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
All the way. Now, can you tell me how the Ryan situation is? Is his challenger making any momentum, or? Yeah,
Ryan is facing an uphill battle, and we're already seeing in some of the early elections that are already taking place where a lot of the established career politicians are getting kicked out. There's a real anti-incumbent. There's a real anti-incumbent fever sweeping this nation, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, Michael, that is good news, and you're singing music to my ears. I'm happy to hear it. Thank you so much. Keep up your fantastic work, and thank you so much.
Well, thank you for the kind words, and we're going to let you go and switch over to Dan in Canada. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, I've got a lot of crabgrass growing on my lawn. Is this Russia that's doing this?
Absolutely. Actually, Putin is doing a genetic experiment of his own. He's crossing marijuana with crabgrass in an effort to revolutionize, the lawn care business. And yes, I did steal that from not Groundhog Day, Caddyshack.
Oh, geez. Anyways, about a month and a half ago, you had a caller calling the show asking, what he can do. And you had mentioned, tell everyone you know, tell the person at the grocery checkout, that kind of thing. And that's a great idea. I've got a couple of bullet points that I made for myself, what I've been doing since, I first saw Larry Silverstein talk about pulling it and seeing WTC7 and everything else under the sun. You can start a YouTube video channel. You don't have to use your real name on it.
Mm-hmm.
You can go on other social media, Google+, Facebook, Instagram, and just spread videos and memes. Memes are like pictures with words to it.
Yeah, I know. I do a lot of those myself here.
Quite potent. Yeah, I know you make some great ones. And just get the word out that way. There's this information age that we're living in. We have to use it to our advantage.
Absolutely.
I live in Canada.
Let me finish, because unfortunately we're coming up on a commercial break and I'm going to have to let you go. As I mentioned earlier in the show, every single one of you listening to this broadcast or reading my website, you are part of the independent media. And that's why you should take all these videos and all these articles and just send them to everybody that you know, because 300 million Americans sharing information among themselves is far more powerful than all the corporate media. And that's the way we need to start seeing ourselves. Okay? Thank you for the phone call, Dan. We got to take a break here, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. A little bit of a shocker. Apparently, George P. Bush, Jeb Bush's son, is supporting Donald Trump. Boy, I'd sure hate to be at their house for dinner tonight. Anyway, getting on back to the news, we're talking about computers and that kind of stuff, and all the problems that are out there. And we don't know what brought Delta down. Maybe it was just bad engineering, sloppy code writing, maybe a cyber attack. Maybe somebody's sending a message to Delta management, send us so much in bitcoins, or you will not get a plane off the ground for the next month. But we do know there are cyber criminals out there. And we do know there's cyber espionage going on, cyber sabotage is going on, and then there is the crime against ordinary people. And the mighty NSA seems unable to deal with any of it. Complete waste of time and money, I think. Now then, apparently over in Android, this is according to the BBC, there are yet more serious security flaws that could give attackers complete access to the phone's data. Apparently the bugs were uncovered by Checkpoint researchers looking at software that's running on chipsets made by the U.S. firm Qualcomm. And these Qualcomm processors are found in about 900 million Android phones. So there really needs to be some fundamental changes to the way software and hardware is being organized. It is a critical infrastructure, and it ought to be handled like one, not this wild, wild west of script kiddies in their basements putting their college fund together off of other people's credit cards. Now then, Microsoft has rolled out the Windows 10 anniversary update. And I want to talk about sloppy code writing. We're looking at this article that came out from the Register over in Great Britain, where apparently the new Windows 10 anniversary update is crashing Windows 10 systems everywhere. And Microsoft's only response so far is, well, try uninstalling it and reinstalling it again. That's it. Now, there's another complaint because apparently large numbers of people, and I'm one of them, you have your regular Microsoft operating system and you will have other operating systems as well. This machine I built here has Windows 7 is the primary operating system. There's an XP for running some software that won't run on Windows 7. And then there's a Linux partition. And a lot of people do that. Linux is a great operating system if you're learning about computers and computer programming. It lets you talk to the bare metal. But apparently this Windows 10 anniversary update, as it installs, is hunting down and deleting Linux partitions. And apparently over at the Ubuntu community, which is one of the Linux variants out there, they're saying they're getting complaints from all their users that the anniversary edition of Windows 10 is simply erasing Linux partitions. There will be only one operating system on this machine, and that's the one that we forced on you. There's a lot of arrogance in American industry these days, and it's probably overcompensating for the growing awareness that the products they're putting out aren't very good, and they're hideously expensive. And certainly in the case of computers, it's not really working for you, the end user, so much as it's working for advertisers, for Microsoft, and for the U.S. government. One of the things Microsoft did on Windows 10 that had a lot of people upset is rather than have their own servers to send out updates, they were using peer-to-peer technology on other people's computers to bucket brigade the updates along, which is a nice way to do it, but then when you talk about peer-to-peer in any other context, oh, that's a bad thing. You can't have that. And by the way, during Microsoft's free Windows 10 upgrade, some of the aggressive methods they use to get people to upgrade violate Microsoft's own policies regarding online presentation of product. from their advertisers. All right, let's talk about Zika because there's something going on down there that we need to be paying attention to. First of all, it has been confirmed that the species of mosquito that is spreading Zika down in Florida is the identical species with those GMO mosquitoes that were released a year ago. Big problem with that. And these mosquitoes carry not only Zika, but dengue, which is nasty. And it's another classic case. Oh, I got a great idea. Let's do this. And it doesn't work out because they don't think it all the way through. They don't look at the worst case scenario. I love the way the global warming people always talk about the precautionary principle. Even if there's a chance something could go wrong, we should not do this. And yet it's being done all the time. So there's an article over in Natural News basically saying that Zika is kind of being hyped because the explosion of brain defects they were warning about hasn't happened. It was a scare campaign because, yes, there's now a Zika vaccine that you can get. And there was even a racial aspect to this where they were talking about, the Zika mosquitoes were selectively targeting black people. And anybody who's an entomologist knows that's nonsense. Mosquitoes hunt by following carbon dioxide. The color of your skin, your gender, your orientation is irrelevant to them. They could care less. Now remember, Zika has been around for at least 60 years. The epidemic of microcephalic babies down in Brazil only happened the last 2 years, following a mandated vaccine campaign for pregnant women. But we have to protect the vaccine industry, so we'll blame Zika. Now here's where it gets really into the twilight zone. Down in Florida, they have now started a major spraying campaign using a organophosphate pesticide called Naled. It's one of the most toxic, and it's been banned in a lot of countries. It has been proven to be dangerous to pregnant women. And yes, it can cause microcephaly. So what we have here is the government wants to fight the Zika virus, which they claim is the cause of microcephaly, with an insecticide that is a known cause of microcephaly. So, again, it's all about selling product, and they're not really thinking about anything else other than making the sale. Sorry about that. Okay, we got some, pardon me. We have some, hang on. We have some callers. I don't know what's wrong with my throat. We have some callers on the line. Kenny in Florida. Aloha, what's on your mind? Kenny, are you there?
I'm here. I heard a little bit of static there. I don't know what happened.
Well, we're having problems with our system, and I'm having problems with my throat. So, go ahead.
All right. You were talking earlier about Windows 10 updates deleting the Linux partitions.
Yes.
And I've noticed with a lot of when you update Windows or you update Linux, what it does is it updates the bootloader, so you don't have the option of dual booting Windows or Linux.
Mm-hmm.
So I would advise you put in a Linux CD and just have it reinstall the bootloader, and then maybe they'll find out that the partitions are still there.
Well, my understanding is the physical partitions are overwritten, that Windows 10 is basically going back out, and when it prepares the disks for the install, for the upgrade rather, it's changing those partitions, because we all know about the bootloaders. And, okay?
So you've confirmed that it is pretty much...
Well, we're going to have to look into it. We're going to have to look into it, because anybody who's a Linux user knows about that bootloader being an issue. And I can't imagine people whose Windows 10 updates are erasing Linux, not understanding that they have to put that bootloader back in. And so, but I'll go dig into it a little bit more. But the story was saying the Linux partitions themselves were being deleted.
Oh, okay. So I wanted to get some clarification on that. I would advise maybe using a rescue disk or your Linux installed disk and just kind of...
I got a better idea, and that is that Microsoft starts to develop a healthy respect for their customers instead of trying to treat us like we're all morons and that they're in possession of our computers, even though that's actually pretty much what the end-user license agreement on Windows says, is Windows has the right to do whatever they want to your machine, and you can't complain, or else you will be denied the blessings of Microsoft's product.
I'm into that. That would be a lot better idea.
Yeah. Instead, see, here's the problem. American industry, especially the software industry, has gotten very, very lazy, and over the last couple of decades, they have taken more of the work that they used to do and transferred it onto the end user. We'll let the end user find the problems. We'll let the end user install the patches. We'll let the end user clean up this mess here because we need bigger bonuses here, and we're going to fire all of our software maintainers and quality assurance people. And Microsoft is letting thousands of people go right now because they're rushing forward to this subscription model where there will not be any new improvements to the system ever again because everybody will pay for it month after month after month.
Well, I'm using Windows 10. I may just go back to Linux.
Well, I like Linux for code development. Obviously, for the animation and music work, I'm sort of compelled to stay with Windows. But I did give Windows 10 a fair and honest test. We had this laptop that was donated to my wife's choir to be her support machine, do playback and MIDI and the rest of it. And we allowed it to do the upgrade to Windows 10, and it was an unmitigated disaster. We hit the revert to your previous operating system option and discovered too late it's not a perfect reversion, and the Windows 7 that we got back was seriously crippled. And ultimately, we just threw the machine in the trash. That was it. That was the end of it. Okay?
Well, alrighty. Well, I just wanted to throw that in. Yeah, thanks a lot.
All right, thank you very much, and I seem to have gotten my voice back here. I have no idea what that was all about. We're going to switch to Rocky in Arizona. Aloha, Rocky. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Thanks. Just a couple of things real quick. One little humorous thing. Did you hear about the cache of weapons that they found, that the moderate rebels had all United States weapons, but that video will never see the light of day because apparently they had their dash cams turned off. I thought that was kind of funny.
Well, this latest story about
no,
hang on before you go any further because I have a comment on that. This video they came out with about how the rebels are capturing American weapons from friendly forces is a cover for the fact that the U.S. has been caught sending weapons into these rebel terrorist groups. And so now they're trying to say, oh, no, we weren't smuggling weapons to them. They're just capturing them from us, which is another way of saying we're losing the war, or the U.S. is losing the war.
Right. Yes, definitely. And also, if you got a minute, I was watching this video that Sibel Edmonds had made. She took a trip actually out to New York to visit the NBC studios and try to get them to retract a story that they covered on the Turkish coup and the apparently false report that Erdogan was circulating Germany and denied, asylum in Germany.
Yes.
So it was a very interesting video. It was almost like a documentary. It began some of the interchange, the exchange with the police. They were sequestered into one of those free speech zones, but they had many Turkish people show up from the local community there with high-profile people locally, and they were in communication even with some Turkish parliament members that were possibly going to try to make it to this event as well. And at the end, all NBC did was they didn't allow them in the building, but they sent down a security representative to relay the message back upstairs to the bigwigs, and they refused basically to retract the story. But I thought the implications of this was huge, because if you bring something like that to the public's attention, that they were actively participating, I guess you could say, NBC, in the coup,
yes,
providing false information, that the implications of that are huge, because then everything that the media reports, then you have to question.
Well, you should be doing that anyway, based on long and very painful experience. But this story about Erdogan being over Germany and denied landing was a hoax that was designed to do exactly the same thing that the claims Donald Trump was going to drop out or that he's trailing in the polls now are designed to do, which is to discourage and undermine and dishearten his supporters. Because obviously that story about Erdogan being over Germany was meant to go back to Turkey and convince his supporters in Turkey they might as well just give up and go along with the coup.
Right. Well, it was a very interesting video. It was almost 2 hours long. They actually live streamed it. I didn't watch it live, but I watched it after. But it was very interesting to see what some of the people there had to say. Like I said, some of the local Turkish high-profile people there in New York spoke, and activists, I guess you could say. But well, yeah, that was about it. I thought it was a huge story, to bring that out into the public's attention that NBC was actually perpetuating this. This lie that we were just mentioning about Erdogan circling Germany.
Yeah. NBC got caught. And you're right. It shows they were complicit in this coup d'etat, along with these two U.S. officials that Turkey has accused and this cleric Gulen, who is known to be connected to the CIA. The U.S. botched this one. There's no other way to put it. There's no kind way to present this. The U.S. botched it up. This is a major foreign policy disaster.
Well, I'm sure most people know that, anytime you see these military advisors and, they have a stake in this whole mess. They either have stock in the weapons manufacturing or some part of it or the uniforms or anything, that the troops are using overseas. They're part owners in these companies, so of course they want to perpetuate war. But anytime you see these advisors, whether it be any of the media outlets, and they always, they get up there with the stars, or if they're retired, they have their expensive suits on, and they're basically spreading the lie, on behalf of the Pentagon right through the news media.
That's right. That's exactly what they're doing. And they're paid very generously for it, and their stock options go on up. And, we've seen time and time again where supposedly independent analysts turn out to be anything but independent. They're just another face of that same corporatocracy. Okay, well, listen, we got to...
You just reminded me, there was no other media there covering that, whether it was mainstream or alternative media. They were the only ones there. I thought that was kind of strange, too.
Very, very telling. All right, well, listen, Rocky, got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here and getting on back to the news here. Interesting little article coming out of David Stockman, ContraCorner.com. How the world was deceived about global warming and climate change, and it's actually a very lengthy article. It goes into a lot of the stuff that's in my ClimateGate article about what really controls climate here on Earth, and he talks about orbital perturbations, precession, change of tilt, as driving climate throughout all of time, and basically says this idea that humans have a significant impact on climate is pure politics, and it's deliberate and central to the exploitation of global warming and climate change as a vehicle to extract money and control over people. One of the major selling points, if you will, for the New World Order globalist government is that global warming or climate change during the cold months can only be solved with a global authority. There's no amount of local action that will have any impact whatsoever. And then they turn around and say, we all have to individually pay carbon taxes to solve the problem. And it reminds me of this quote by H.L. Mencken, which I put up on the page under this article. The whole aim of practical politics is to keep the populace alarmed and hence clamorous to be led to safety by menacing it with an endless series of hobgoblins, all of them imaginary. Whether it's human-caused global warming, the red menace, the yellow menace, whatever. That's how you are ruled. Government will tell you there's a problem, a threat out there, and only by obeying them can you avoid catastrophe. Basically, they create a problem. Then they'll offer to sell you the solution. Now, up in Vancouver, they had a sudden cold snap hit. Temperature unexpectedly plunged 10 degrees and gave them the second coldest August 2nd on record ever. We're heading into yet another early, hard winter here in the northern hemisphere. Now, down in New Zealand, where they're getting into their springtime, they're still getting a heavy weather there. And they're saying temperatures are set to plunge to minus 15 degrees centigrade across the South Island tonight. Their ski resorts are delighted. They get to stay open late. Delay their seasonal closing here. Apparently, parts of Norway are going to be getting August snow this week. It's human-caused global warming. Well, we can't call it that anymore. It's climate change. Climate always changes. Climate always changes. It always has. It always will. It was changing before humans showed up. It's going to go on changing after we are gone. Do humans have an impact on the climate? Yes. Is it significant? No. It's just another money-making control trick. Got to take a break for top of the hour station identification. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and we're going to go ahead and grab a phone call. Mateus in Canada, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good.
Hey, look, I'm one of your biggest fans. I promote you constantly. I put your website on my email signatures. I stop people at the gas station. I do everything I can to help your project.
Thank you.
And I never thought I would ask for anything in return, but just this one thing. Could you please allow me to respectfully disagree with something and just not be hung up on and just quickly explain a different perspective on one topic?
Well, that depends on the topic.
It's the geoengineering topic.
Well, we have been down.
Please,
we've been down this time and time again, and I have looked very carefully at all the so-called evidence presented for this. But let me ask you a question: if there was really a system out there that was able to re-engineer our Earth, then why are they screaming about human-caused global warming? Why don't they just turn the thermostat down?
Okay, let me just have a chance to answer that. And please, know your perspective on it. Just please let me have a chance from this other perspective. The answer to that question is that they're trying their best, but we are going into another Maunder minimum ice age. They can't quite pull it off, but the geoengineering does trap thermal radiation at nighttime when it's trying to exit and go back out into space. So there is, there's a local cooling effect immediately, but there's a net global warming effect. That's part of it. I want to just mention about kookification. I 100% agree with you that they do that.
Yes, they do.
Like the flat Earth is about trying to make Rivero look stupid if he talks about it on his show. I get it.
Yes.
And the problem here is that you're totally right about this, about everything else, except this is one thing. I'm convinced this is one thing that you've just gotten in the wrong category. This one actually is real, but it's been slipped into the kookification category. Now, I've seen government-funded scientists having lectures talking about flat Earth and geoengineering at the same time. So they're trying to kookify geoengineering by mixing it with flat Earth. And just a really good point here is that China, the Olympics in China, they admit that they used weather modification to increase the best possible chances of having a good day during the Olympics. That's like official state information. Mm-hmm. And in Russia, when they had their last major military parade, they say that they used weather modification, aerosols being sprayed out of airplanes. They're just proud of themselves because they used silver particles, which aren't as bad as
okay, well, now we're crossing the line between, engineering the Earth as a whole versus localized rainmaking. Rainmaking has been around for a very, very long time, and believe it or not, Native Americans used to throw silver into their campfires with the belief that the silver particles would trigger rain, which if you have clouds overhead, yes, it can do. The problem I have with this idea of engineering the Earth as a whole is the amount of energy required to, in effect, a change on that kind of mass is still beyond the technology of our age. And again, looking for what should be there and isn't. If there was anything to this geoengineering, then we would be seeing things different than they are right now. Out of control winters, out of control flooding, out of control quakes, volcanoes, and the rest of it. Anyway, I've given you a fair chance to get your point of view across. We're going to have to agree to disagree on this. So thank you very much for the phone call. No, we're done. Thank you. And I have looked at this, and yes, I think it's in the same category with the people pushing flat Earth, phony Apollo moon landings, HAARP, chemtrails. It's called poisoning the well, and it's a well-known propaganda technique to throw something that is silly into the middle of a discussion or a debate in order to ridicule the whole thing. I'll give you a good example. Back when John F. Kennedy was assassinated and suspicions surfaced that it was more than just Lee Harvey Oswald, there was this story planted about the so-called umbrella man. There was a man along the motorcade route with an umbrella, and somebody came out and said there was a dart gun in the umbrella, and it paralyzed John F. Kennedy so that he couldn't move while he was being shot, blah, 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 blah. And a lot of people, unfortunately, bought into that. And during the House Select Committee on Assassinations, they actually identified the man. They brought him in with the umbrella, and they opened it up and showed it to just be an ordinary umbrella. And they were all making jokes about it. Don't point that umbrella at me. Yuck, 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 yuck. And see how silly those conspiracy theorists were about the JFK assassination. And by the way, the term conspiracy theorist was coined to deal with those who were asking questions about the JFK assassination. Now, in the end, based on the audio data, which was irrefutable, the House Select Committee on Assassinations was forced to admit, yes, there had been more than one shooter in Dealey Plaza, and by definition, that made it a conspiracy. But these kind of poison the well techniques happen all the time. When Jim Garrison put Clay Shaw on trial for the assassination, they managed to get a witness planted on him who looked like the real deal. He'd seen Clay Shaw and Lee Harvey Oswald together, and then once this guy got on the stand before the jury, you know, he was telling about how he had to fingerprint his own daughter every single day when she came home to make sure there hadn't been a substitution. And this one witness destroyed Garrison's case against Clay Shaw, and Clay Shaw was acquitted and walked free and then died of a suspicious heart attack a few weeks later. And the jury said, yeah, that Garrison had convinced them there had been a conspiracy to assassinate John F. Kennedy. He just had not made the case that Clay Shaw had anything to do with it. And then years and years later, Richard Secord came on out and said that, yes, Clay Shaw had in fact been a major CIA contract agent. So these kind of propaganda techniques are out there, and you have to be on guard against them. Because right now the corporate media and the government understand full well they can't lure you back. They're going to have to level the playing field by bringing the credibility of the independent media down to the same level or below as the corporate media. And that's what all this nonsense is all about. We're going to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining our network at this time. And we're going to go ahead and grab a phone call from Obi in Colorado. Aloha, Obi. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind today?
Hi, Michael. I just want to point out one thing. All these flat earther kooks, all they got to do is go into an aircraft that's about 36,000 feet, and that's where most commercial aircraft fly, and you can see the curvature of the Earth.
Well, the way they explain that, I actually, believe it or not, I saw this in National Geographic in the article they wrote, Why Don't People Trust Science Anymore? Of course, science is not supposed to be about trust. It's supposed to be about factual evidence and reproducibility. But the so-called flat Earth isn't actually flat. It's kind of they've got it as a donut shape or an inverted donut. And you don't even need to go to 30,000 feet. Just anytime you see a lunar eclipse, that shadow of the Earth on the moon is always curved. No matter what the angle between the sun and the moon and the Earth, it's always the same curve. And the only object that casts a constant curved shadow is a sphere. You know what's really amazing is the ancient Greeks and Romans knew the Earth was round. They even had a good estimate on its size based on shadow sticks. And this whole flat Earth thing seems to have emerged about the same time as Christianity.
Can I make one more comment?
Sure.
I remember when I was a kid, a little kid, and hearing my mother and father talking about how Lyndon Johnson had rigged his election in Texas to get into Congress.
Yes.
And, so even back then, people knew that the elections were rigged. And if they're rigging them on, for the president, then they're rigging them for Congress and, Senate, House, So the elections are getting rigged even further down the line.
Yeah, and up until now, the big lie has been, well, maybe this person cheated once, and maybe that person cheated once, and that person over there got caught cheating here. But overall, the system is sound and trustworthy, and this is the year the American people are saying, no, our election system is completely untrustworthy. It's wide open to fraud, and it was designed to be that way.
Okay, Michael, that's all I got for you today.
All right, well, thank you very much. We're going to switch over to Tom in Florida. Aloha, Tom. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, well, good day, Michael. First off, let's talk about, you want to talk real quickly about Lee Harvey Oswald. Remember, on video, on tape, they have him where he says, I didn't shoot nobody.
Yes.
And let's not forget, Lee Harvey Oswald said, I didn't shoot nobody, just like Jack Rubenstein, Ruby, his real name is Rubenstein. They never really went in depth on all that nonsense. I know what it's all about, but I'd rather not say it right now. But I want to get back to this election real quick, Michael. And first off, they shot an Iranian scientist, I guess, for espionage or something. I'm this is a breaking story.
Yes.
And then I'm looking at all these. I'm seeing these polls about Hillary and Trump, and it seems like all the people that are doing these polling with are minority groups. I don't see no white males. I see some white women, but I don't see no white males being polled by any of these outlets the way I saw it on Fox News. And I'm like saying, wait a minute, what is this? And, it's just unbelievable that they're doing anything to get a criminal like Hillary Clinton. Her husband, Bill Clinton, was an impeached president. Michael, you got to understand this. People, I hope they understand this. 7 more senators would have had, the Republican Party would have had 7 more senators at that time. Bill Clinton would have been the first president actually impeached out of office. Andrew Johnson.
No, he would have been the second.
Impeached with Lincoln. What's that?
There was one other who was removed from office very early in the nation's history.
Andrew Johnson.
Yes.
Andrew Johnson, but he was Andrew Johnson. That was during Abraham Lincoln's term. But what's going on here with this election is the biggest thievery of all times. And you're going to have a crooked woman who gave up 30,000 emails or more. Her husband was an impeached president. He made one woman worth $10 million for having a tune-up in the White House. It's just amazing to me. And the media, these complacent rats. Michael, it's just amazing that these white women, why are you going to sell, you're not going to build, you're going to have the invasion of this country totally wiped out. It's going to be look, South Florida is a perfect example. Look at Venezuela, Michael. Little kids are starving to death over there. That's what the Democrats are like over here, these socialist Democrats. And look at Venezuela. The place is ready to collapse. I mean, it's unbelievable. You got cities in this country are annihilation. Detroit, Philadelphia, Chicago. Look at the crime rate. These blacks go out in droves and vote for a Democrat. And the Jewish people are voting 89% for Hillary.
I'm not sure it's quite that high, but getting on back to the polls, and this is the important thing to get on out there. Yes, the media is cooking the polls. They're polling more Democrats than Republicans. They're targeting these small sub-demographic groups because they know these people are supporting Hillary Clinton. There's an article over an Investment Watch blog where ABC and the Washington Post, when they're doing their polling, they'll call up the House and ask for the youngest person in the home to get their opinion. But these are people who in most cases are not eligible to vote because they are too young. They're literally cherry-picking the polling data to get the results they want.
Well, Michael, one more thing. Look at this guy, Obama. He was going to a church where a guy named Reverend Jeremiah Wright was preaching total hate against white people. And damn this. I mean, can you imagine if Donald Trump would have been to a church like that, going to a church like that for years? A white male going to a church like that? It would be in the media 24 hours, 365 days for the next 10 years, even if he wasn't running for office anymore. They would annihilate a guy like Trump or any white male. But when it comes to a black or a minority group, these people are getting away with literally murder.
Well,
okay. The schmuck media is behind this, and they're complacent. And I'm going to tell you, what I saw, I never forgot what I saw on the History Channel. And they were even talking about Hitler back on the History Channel. And they even had it when it's BBC and the CBS when he flew into New York, the nephew of Adolf Hitler, and he's telling him, Uncle Adolf, why are you doing this to the Jews? You're a Jew. Why was that ever? Why isn't that in the media every day for the next 100 years?
Okay, now hang on a second. I want to pull back from talking about Jew this and Jew that, because what's really going on here is the narcocracy. And what we're seeing today in the United States of America is a replay of all the corruption that occurred during Prohibition, when the U.S. government banned all alcohol, and those who traded in alcohol all of a sudden became so rich they could literally buy their way to the highest levels of the U.S. government. That's where the Kennedy dynasty began. Old Joe Kennedy was a rum runner, and he acquired enough money to put his eldest son into the White House, his next oldest one on the way to the White House, and the third one fell off a bridge. But that's what happened, and we're seeing the same thing today, only it's not alcohol, it's drugs. And remember, both Bush and Clinton families track back to that Iran-Contra gun and drug-running operation out of Mena, Arkansas, down to Nicaragua. And it was illegal both because they were doing the drug running, it was illegal because of a violation of the Boland Amendment to be conducting clandestine warfare in Nicaragua. They violated money laundering laws. It's a criminal enterprise pretending that it's a government. And it's an exact replay of what happened in Prohibition, only it's a lot worse. Because the Clintons have stolen more money and killed more people than even Al Capone did.
I agree, Michael. And Michael, let me ask you a question. First off, Bill Kennedy, the oldest son, got burned up on a bomber plane, so he's
you're right. John F. Kennedy was the second. I stand corrected on that.
You're right. But let me go back to the $50 billion Israel was received for this military. What would $50 billion do for our border patrol right now in this country?
What would it do for our schools? What would it do for our roads? What would it do for our bridges?
What would $50 billion do for our country? That's what I'd like to know.
And what about that missing
Social Security's on the brink of bankruptcy, Michael. And this government's giving away billions and billions, maybe $1 trillion to these foreign countries. And then you got China, and now it's broken out where it wasn't the China, it wasn't the Russians who were happening in these emails. It was NSA.
Tom, got to calm down a little bit. Calm down. Take a deep breath. What about that missing $6 trillion with a T from the Pentagon? And don't forget the other $3 trillion that vanished just before 9/11. There are obscene amounts of our money are simply vanishing instead of being used to take care of the United States of America and the American people. And that right there basically tells you how far down the path we have gone to a total fascist dictatorship.
And Michael, that's why they're so afraid of Donald Trump. They're afraid of getting. If you get a guy like Trump in there who's Trump will expose so much stuff. I don't think the American public can handle it. If Donald Trump,
I think the American public can handle it.
They're quaking in their boots.
I think the American public can handle it. They're going to handle it the same way the people of the Soviet Union did when they finally learned the true nature of their government. We're going to give them all pink slips, is what we're going to do here. And you're right, that's why they're afraid of Trump. But if we put Trump in the White House, we also have to give him a Congress that is going to work with him and not obstruct his every step. And that is the reason why I'm absolutely applauding what appears to be the beginning of an anti-incumbency fever sweeping this nation.
Well, I hope you're right, Michael, but I'm in Florida, as you know, and the Hillary's down here now lying her tail off. And then you got this Debbie Blabbermouth Schultz, who should be, if it was a Republican did what she did, they would have that person in jail. But you got Debbie Blabbermouth, and now, this whole thing is a big Kabbalah. That's all I can say. The whole thing's a Kabbalah. That's what it is.
No, okay, hang on. A cabal is what you really mean. Kabbalah is a religion. Cabal. It's the narcocracy. That's the word you need to use, the narcocracy. A government that is steeped in drug money corruption, whether it's that cocaine and gun running operation in out of Mena, Arkansas, or the Clinton Foundation today. It's already tainted with drug money from that HSBC deal.
Yes. Well, Michael, look, back in the 50s when McCarthy was doing his polio witch hunt against all these communists who were in Hollywood, which actually was proven right, that he was telling the whole truth about what was going on. We figured out 9 out of 10 who those people were back in when McCarthy was doing his,
Tom, I have to call you on that one. Because what was really going on with McCarthy is the U.S. government wanted Hollywood, which had done yeoman service making propaganda movies for World War II, demonizing Japan and Germany. They wanted them to start demonizing Russia. And a lot of people in Hollywood said, no, they were our allies. We don't have a reason to be demonizing them. And anybody who refused to go along with the propaganda was deemed a commie sympathizer and had their career ruined. And there were a lot of very honorable people who tried to stand up to it, and they did lose their careers. In fact, at the top of my webpage, and I'm going to repost it on the commercial break, I have an article on the new McCarthyism, because we're seeing a repeat, but it goes into detail about what was really going on about McCarthy and his witch hunts. It was about purging Hollywood of anybody who refused to make propaganda films for the U.S. government. And that's what it was really all about. And besides which, up until recently, it was legal to have a communist party in this country. And certainly compared to some of our current parties today, I'm not sure they were all that bad. And yes, the U.S. government was being subverted, but it wasn't from Russia, it was from Israel. We got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here, and we're going to go right to the phones. Poor Richard in -1. Aloha, what's on your mind? Poor Richard, are you there? Hello? Okay, I guess not. I guess we lost that phone call.
Oh, there he is. No kidding.
Are you there?
I can hear you.
Okay, you're on the air. What's on your mind?
Well, I've been, everybody seems to think Israel is the bad guy and wham, wham, wham. Well,
No. Okay, our position is Israel's government makes some very questionable decisions, but the people of Israel cannot be held responsible for it because they can't get their government under control any more than we can.
Okay, then let me suggest this. Most of the decisions I believe Israel makes are made in London, in the city of London, because Netanyahu is, he's tied to the banking system there, to the max.
Yes.
Just like Dick Cheney is tied to ours, to the banking system. Run the Rothschilds and all that bunch,
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I'm calling is because I'm, saying that a lot of people are thinking that Israel is the bad guy, and Israel isn't the bad guy, or the Israelis for that matter. It's the government, but the government of Israel, I'm under the conclusion that it's bought and paid for by the city of London, and all the decisions. So in other words, Israel was created to be a festering boil that
listen, I want to be a little bit less colorful in the language here because we're trying to keep this kind of professional. First of all, you have to disabuse yourself of this idea that there is ultimately some one institution, monolithic construct that is calling all the shots for the globe. There isn't. You have dozens and dozens of competing groups and competing agendas. Out of the chaos of that is what we get as world events. Israel's got its agenda. The City of London has its agenda. Brussels has its agenda. Washington, D.C. has an agenda. The Federal Reserve has an agenda. There isn't any one group that is really significantly in control. Some have more reach and power than others, like the United States, but that power is very much on the wane. So I'm sure that Netanyahu answers to a lot of different people, not just the City of London, but his own financial backers. He's trying to, repair relations with the U.S. At the same time he's getting all buddy-buddy with Putin. So you need to stop thinking that somewhere there's a single ultimate cause of all of the evil on earth, because there isn't. Wars are never fought for just one reason. Assassinations never are carried out for just one reason. When you get a certain number of these different groups who have different agendas, and their agendas are all served by that same event, the event will happen.
Well, okay. Well, that's a different take from my ideas of things, but, you've been around a while, so I'll take that under my hat, okay?
All right. Well, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. Now then, I want to go back and touch on the subject of Vic Thorne, who was an author, and he was found dead recently, just about the same time his Clinton trilogy had been acquired for translation and distribution in other parts of the world, which for a writer is a huge, huge success. And, of course, when Vic Thorne's death was announced, suicide, and they made a big deal over the fact that his brother on a phone interview, while he was still traumatized, and hadn't really thought about it, was saying, oh, it was terrible for suicide, and, he really didn't like it, blah, blah, blah. Today, the family are saying they do not go along with the claim it was a suicide, and they've come on out and said, basically, apparently, Vic Thorne was on Russell Scott's talk show back on August 3rd, and during the interview he said, Russell, if I'm ever found dead, it was murder. I would never kill myself. So we have more of these bodies that are piling on up all over the place. All right, we're coming up on a commercial break. We've got a caller waiting on the line, wants to talk about BCCI. And we will do so when we come back from these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're going to go back to the phones here. Ralph in New York City. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. How you doing? I'd like to ask a hypothetical question. In a Donald Trump administration, could we see another era of the 80s again while he's in office? Do you see any concept of that?
Yeah. In which context?
Everyone's saying that in a Donald Trump administration, he's an admirer of Ronald Reagan. Everyone's talking about the BCCI scandal of the 80s and Iran-Contra all over again. What do you see? What's your opinion on that?
Well, definitely, we are seeing a repeat of the BCCI scandal through that Clinton Foundation, and we're still living through the aftermath of Iran-Contra. Now, you need to remember that Ronald Reagan, while he was president, was already beginning to suffer the debilitating effects of Alzheimer's disease, and most of the real decision-making had fallen onto his vice president, George Herbert Walker Bush. In fact, the attempt on Reagan's life may have been an attempt to sort of promote George Herbert Walker Bush into that seat that he was already doing the job for. Remember, the Hinckleys and the Bush family were all very good friends. In fact, George Bush's son was supposed to have dinner with some of them that very night and obviously had to call it all off. But it's just one unending chain of corruption and power, and it used to be hidden from the American people through this matrix, if you will, of corporate media presentation. But that's all starting to fall apart now.
We were in a major recession back in the 80s, and people didn't realize during the Reagan presidency we had a major recession. This era now, this is a depression we're living in now, right? As the way you see it.
Yeah, I see it. It's a major depression. It's not yet a full-on lockup of the economic system, but that could be coming very quickly.
So Trump could actually try to change that epidemic around? Could he do that, or basically he will be in a lockup in a new era of government if he's in power?
Well, that's why it's important for us to not only work to get Donald Trump into the White House, but to give him a Congress that's going to cooperate with him and not obstruct his every move. And we need to pink slip all that old guard, all of these Israel firsters, all the war hawks, all the people who've got ties into the narcocracy. We got to vote them out. And so far in the states where they're having the early elections, we're seeing a lot of the incumbent established politicians getting the old heave-ho, and that's a good thing.
So is that happening in effect right now, or that's
slow
motion slowly?
Well, it's going to be between now and November, but we're already starting to see it in some of the states where they're having their separate Senate representative state offices elections. And we're coming up on ours here in Hawaii in another week, I think it is. Another couple of days. And then, of course, the big election in November will be mostly about the presidency.
Wow, another thing also, I just see Hillary Clinton. Her health is kind of shaky. You see conservatives walking her around a lot. You starting to see that also? She's very epileptic.
Well, I don't know that she's epileptic. I mean, a lot of people are looking at that video where her head is bouncing around, and it even put off the reporter who was interviewing her. Many years ago, I actually had a girlfriend who was dealing with epilepsy, and so I got to see a lot of real seizures. I think Hillary likes to ham it up. She's playing to the gallery. I think she's trying to create this illusion that she actually has a likable personality, and failing miserably, I might add. But there are serious, legitimate areas of inquiry into her health, the stumbling, the Fresnel prism in her eyeglasses, and some other issues as well that we do need to pay attention to. But again, tread carefully, because Hillary's people are going to use it to play for sympathy, and you're discriminating against the aged and infirm. But we really shouldn't have aged, infirm, reckless, careless, negligent, brain short-circuited people in the Oval Office.
Wow. All right, Mike. Heard enough. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. We're going to let you go here. Moving back on to the news. WikiLeaks has once again come out with proof. Hillary Clinton was selling weapons to ISIS. This is coming out of blacklisted news. It's there for anybody who goes to look at what's really going on behind ISIS and Al-Qaeda in the U.S. It's there to find. For everybody who's just sitting on their butt in front of the TV screen, they're completely clueless and oblivious. Now, there's a new trend starting to take hold on the independent media. And that is that as these corporate media polls become unbelievable in their claims that Hillary has a double-digit lead over Donald Trump, more and more independent media outlets are just deciding to run their own polls, like we do here at WhatReallyHappened.com. And I just saw one of them, Donald Trump at 72%. And we all need to do that. Because if we have thousands of online polls showing Donald Trump in the lead, it makes it more and more obvious that these corporate media polls are being made up. In fact, there's an article we just put up at WhatReallyHappened.com talking about how all these commercial polling groups used by the corporate media, they coordinate. They've literally got a central office where they meet to share information, to provide skewed data and coordinate so that their numbers are all sort of looking pretty much the same way. It is a manufactured propaganda hoax. They are not measuring the will of the American voter. They're trying to manufacture it. And it is a technique that works. If the media goes on out there and tells you that 90% of the people are voting for Hitler, a lot of people are going to say, well, I'm just going to go with the crowd. I haven't thought about it. I don't have a clue about the issues here, but if 9 out of 10 of my fellow citizens think this is the way to go, then I'm just going to go that way too. But the claim that 9 out of 10 of your fellow citizens are going that way is a fiction and an illusion. And again, ultimately, the very best thing you can do, like those kids did themselves, must have been for a school project, go around and talk to people everywhere, at the store, at the library, at the laundromat, at school, wherever, and just say, who are you voting for? And find out for yourself how overwhelming the support for Donald Trump really is. Be your own best researcher. Be your own part of the independent media. You are all part of the independent media, as long as you are willing to go on out and act like it. Collect the information and forward it. Remember, the Soviet Union was brought down by a very simple peer-to-peer system involving fax machines. We're way beyond that technology. What it takes is the will to be involved. The courage to stand up and say, this nation has gone in a horrible direction. It is time to change course, or our children are going to inherit a nightmare world to grow up in. Now, getting on back to the science stuff here, down in Australia, Senator Malcolm Roberts has openly called climate change a United Nations conspiracy, and certainly they're at the heart of it with that Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and all the falsehoods they put out. And Roberts has just come on out and say it's a conspiracy created by bankers seeking to establish a worldwide government. And he's absolutely right. The platform on which they want to build the New World Order, one world government, rests on 3 pillars. One of them is human-caused global warming, requiring a global environmental authority. The second one was a global pandemic, requiring a global health authority. That one kind of fizzled back in 2009 with the When Pigs Fly flu, which turned out to not be the horror that everybody assured you it was going to be. And the third one is a global economic crisis, which we seem to be on the verge of, at which point they're going to try and sell us a single global private central bank. And nobody's going to go for that, because private central banking is what caused the global economic crash. And simply setting up a new private central bank is kind of like backing the Titanic up and whacking the other side of the bow into that iceberg and hoping the leak will stop. That's how silly that all is. Now, I got an email from a listener getting on back to Windows 10. Apparently over in Great Britain, researchers have discovered when you first use your Windows 10 and sign in, they've discovered it will simply record the first 30 seconds of your webcam and audio and ship it to who knows where. Windows 10 has been caught via Wireshark packet capture, taking screenshots of whatever is on your screen, encrypting it with RSA, and shipping it off to Microsoft. They're spying on you. And it's wired right in. No wonder they were giving that stuff away. Now, as you know, Iran just executed that spy. His cover story was he'd been abducted and coerced by the United States. How did Iran find out he'd really sold them out? Well, it was being discussed on Hillary's weak private email server 10 days before he left to return to Iran. Iran has now demanded the United States comply with their part of the P5+1 deal and unfreeze $2 billion of Iran's assets, which are locked up in the United States. Because since the P5+1 was signed, Iran has kept all its commitments. They've done everything they promised they were going to do. The U.S. has reneged. They're refusing to return the money that was part of that P5+1 agreement. And they're trying to come up with all kinds of excuses why they shouldn't have to, including this idea that, well, Iran may be keeping all the promises of the P5+1, but they're being defiant in other areas. And we're going to keep the $2 billion because they're being defiant. But that's going to be a really big stink. We're hearing more and more from around the country about how there is a campaign to declare the Gadsden flag as hate speech. Remember I told you about how part of the New World Order psychological agenda is to erase our individual sense of identity. Who we are, where we come from, our place in history. They're trying to get rid of all cultural reminders that might cloud our brains when the flag of the New World Order is unfurled before us in all of its glory. Now, there's nothing racist about the Gadsden flag. It's an American Revolutionary War flag. It's that yellow flag with the coiled rattlesnake. It says, "Don't tread on me." But they're trying to claim that this is racist and therefore can be legally punished by law as hate speech, like they're already doing with the Confederate flag, or what we all think is the Confederate flag. There's the joke about it. The stars and bars Confederate flag that everybody's making a fuss about wasn't the flag of the Confederacy. It was something that was made up in early Hollywood movies about the Civil War because it was much easier to sew than the real Confederate flag. That flag appeared once as a Confederate naval ensign only. It was never the flag of the Confederacy. They just put it out there. Hollywood made it up. And now it's a sign of racism. No, the Confederacy didn't use it. It's all a big stink over a Hollywood fabrication. But the goal is to erase our sense of identity, to erase our roots. And by the way, that was a psychological technique used by the slave owners in the antebellum South. They'd get these people off the boats. The first thing they'd do is change their name, forbid them from using their own language, force them to learn English, destroy their own original identity. They did it to the Native American children during the expansion into the West. Get them into schools, get them to wear American clothing, punish them for using their native language, force them to use English, make them forget who they were, because it makes them easier to control. And now they're trying to do it to all of us. Now, if you are a fan of jewelry, like my lovely wife Claire, you're probably familiar with the Koh-i-Noor diamond. And it is a huge, huge diamond. It's part of the British crown jewels. It's in the top of the coronation crown. And India is now saying they would like it back because it's from India. And like so much that is in possession of Great Britain, was acquired through less than honorable means. They're still having a big stink over the Elgin marbles in the British Museum that were originally taken from the Parthenon in Athens, Greece. Greece wants that back. Britain is saying, we stole it fair and square, it's our right of conquest, and the rest of it. So Indian legislators are looking at different channels to try and force Great Britain to return the Koh-i-Noor diamond. And Britain is, of course, refusing because it's part of their heritage as part of the crown jewel. So this is going to get a little bit stinky. It's just a rock, people. Anyway, here's another breaking story from WikiLeaks. This is coming out of Natural Blaze. Apparently, some of the top alcohol companies in America lavished huge amounts of donations and lobbying on Congress to denounce marijuana and block attempts to legalize it. Because if you're growing marijuana in your backyard, then you're not going on down to the bottle shop to buy a bottle of whatever it is they're selling this week. And health studies are showing that alcohol is actually far worse for you than marijuana. It causes much more lasting permanent damage. And now we have the alcohol companies behaving like the tobacco companies back when that whole stink about how harmful they were was starting to surface. By the way, Russell Crowe has a movie called The Insider. It's making the rounds on cable TV, and that's a good movie to catch because it's based on the true story of how it finally came on out. The cigarette companies knew they were selling a dangerous, addictive product, and Brown and Williams wound up being fined huge amounts of money over that. There are some good movies out there about politics and corruption. They usually get lousy reviews. Oh, you don't want to see that. Good example would be the one I was talking about earlier in the show, Our Brand is Crisis. Sandra Bullock stars in it. And it's about how campaigns get won through dirty tricks. It's a good movie. But when it came on out, the critics said, oh, it's terrible. You don't want to see that. You don't want to. Because the critics work for the corporate media, and corporate media is part of this problem of taking elections away from being a genuine measure of the will of the people and turning it into a contest whose victory is based on whoever's got the most money. Oligarchy. That's what it is. All right, we're about to take our last break for the day, and we'll be back with the last segment of our program after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program on this Monday here, and the Clinton camp is getting very, very nervous. People are setting up independent polls because they don't trust the corporate polls. People are going on out and scanning social media to find out what people are really thinking about the candidates, and it comes back overwhelmingly for Trump. It's not just Hillary Clinton who may be headed for a fall, but all of the corporate media with her, and it's long overdue. Because for any nation to survive, they must have a free and independent media to act as a watchdog on government abuse, and our corporate media is hand in glove with the oppressors. And hopefully we're at the beginning of a very peaceful revolution, a transition to a smaller, more responsible, respectful government and a media that understands they're supposed to be working for the American people, not for themselves. And let's see, apparently Pat Caudell is out there saying Reuters isn't just tweaking the polls, they're outright cooking them. They're just putting the numbers out there. This is a full court press. You can almost smell the panic coming out of the Hillary campaign, coming out of Washington, D.C. as a whole, coming out of Wall Street, coming out of the narcocracy, coming out of the boardrooms of the corporate media. They're in serious, serious trouble, and they don't know what to do. They're dealing with a credibility crisis of immense proportions. They did it to themselves. And there really is no way back, because you can spend 100 years earning the trust of your population, your readership, your viewership. One clumsy lie can wreck it. Trust arrives on foot, but departs on horseback. And that's why they're out there trying to flood the independent media with phony moon landing stuff, flat earth stuff, and all the rest of that nonsense. They know they can't build their own trustworthiness up in the minds of the public. All they can do is play dirty tricks to tear the independent media down. And it's really not working. So, interesting times indeed. Interesting times indeed. And again, forget the polls that you see anywhere. Talk to your friends and neighbors. And just say, I don't trust the corporate media to report honestly what's going on. This is an informal survey. Who are you voting for? And just keep a tab for your own edification. That's all it's going to take to break the media monopoly on the minds of America. And one more thing, and I'm going to be pushing this as we get into September, October. On Election Day, everybody who vote for Donald Trump, just take a couple of pieces of tape and put a T on the front of your shirt. If every Trump voter does that, it's going to make it impossible to steal that election. Just going to cost you some tape. There's the music. Time for me to get out of here and do the Jim Goddard Show up in Vancouver. We'll be back tomorrow, Tuesday, here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Until then, stay informed, stay skeptical, be part of the independent media, share what you know with everybody that you know. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.